Thank you, Bob. A little housekeeping first. Jill, we are recording, are we not? Great. Great to see a good audience here and on Zoom, and to know that this program is going to be televised, certainly in Glenview and offered in other villages around the North Shore, because it's very important. Allan Kaufman is a friend, a very active Tuesday Club member, and someone you may already know because this is Allan's fourth Tuesday Club talk. You'll remember his swimming with the sharks as a volunteer diver with the Shed Aquarium. Volunteering is a very important part of Allan's life. And we're grateful for that. And his talk on distracting driving, as a professional in his professional life, he did that, and he shared that with us. More recently, Allan helped us understand environmental risks facing our Great Lakes. But today's program is a very special program. It's about Flight 93. One day after the 22nd anniversary of 9/11. I'm not going to ask anyone to raise their hand if they remember where they were 22 years ago yesterday, because we all know that. We all know that. 9/11 has a special meaning for all of us, even more so for our veterans. So I'd like to ask this for a show of hands. How many here are veterans or family members have been veterans? Raise your hand. Thank you so much. For those of you who are on Zoom, we had about 20 or more people raise their hand, and we honor them, and we honor those of you on Zoom who couldn't be here but raised your hand. We honor all our veterans. I did not have the honor of serving in our military. Allan, too, our speaker, is a veteran, a combat veteran of Vietnam. And as I said, I haven't served, but Kay and I drove to a little town called Shanksville a couple years before 9/11 to visit the homeland of Kay's pioneer ancestors. The Kimmels came from this little town, the 1700s. And when it was announced on the news that something is happening there, it struck home for us. We passed by rolling hills where Flight 93 would come to rest. And we drove nearby again 22 years ago today. We were on a car trip to Kitty Hawk, and we passed by. We couldn't get off. In fact, when you take the Pennsylvania Turnpike, you'll pass by the exit that would get you to where this was. And the only thing I distinctly remember was the smell of kerosene or airplane fuel 22 years ago today. Shanksville is a beautiful part of America, but there's more to its history than the early American, Scottish, German pioneers who farmed there centuries ago. What happened 22 years ago will forever be in our hearts. Let's learn about the heroic, true story of Flight 93. Please welcome our guest speaker, Allan Kaufman.
Well, first I want to thank Ron for, I hope you can hear me okay in the back. I wanted to thank Ron for the introduction. It's an honor to be here on this day. It really is. Today, we're going to talk about a tale of heroes. And many of you might know the tale of heroes that we're going to talk about. Because yesterday, as you all probably know, was that infamous date of 9/11/2001. And if you watched the news last night, you saw many different coverage of, mainly of New York, a little bit of the Pentagon, and not much about what happened in Pennsylvania. So we want to talk about what's happened in Pennsylvania. So I know the bar's there, and I don't know if it's going to go away or not, but as Ron said, you probably all remember what you were doing when you heard the news on 9/11/2001, because it's a day that, like in 1963, we kind of all remember what we were doing and where we were. At 8:46 in the morning, a terrorist hijacked plane flew into the North Tower of the World Trade Center. And just a few minutes later at 9:03, another terrorist hijacked plane flew into the South Tower of the World Trade Center, causing massive death, injury, and destruction. And then at 9:37, a third terrorist hijacked plane flew into the Pentagon building in Washington. And I want you to look at, you follow the arrow on the right side that came up just now. That arrow is pointing to an office. And in that office was a family member, a naval officer who was assigned to the Pentagon, and that right near the area of the crash site. Unfortunately, the Pentagon went on immediate blackout. And we didn't know for 3 days whether he was alive or well. Finally, on the fourth day, they lifted the communications blackout, and he was able to call his mother and say he was alive. So this kind of struck home for us too. And then we have this building. You might recognize this building. This is our Capitol. And look at what happened here. Nothing. Not a thing. It was really saved by the tale of heroes. And that's what we're going to talk about today. What happened here? This is a story about United Flight 93, which basically was scheduled to take off from Newark, New Jersey around 8:15 in the morning. But through delays, it ended up leaving Newark, bound for San Francisco at 8:42. Once it got in the air, some of the passengers and the crew were notified about what had happened in New York. From things that were recovered from the crash site, we learned, or the government learned, that this plane was also hijacked by terrorists around 9:30 in the morning. The terrorists got on, as you'll hear in a minute, and said, "There's a bomb on board. We're going back to the airport," which wasn't really true. They weren't going back to the airport. So I hope this video can play and you'll watch it.
We're back in Somerset County, Pennsylvania. The days leading up to the 10th anniversary of 9/11 tended to be rainy in the east, but we wanted to come here to the Flight 93 National Memorial near Shanksville. This will be the visitors' entrance when the memorial opens to the public for the first time on Saturday. Flight 93 was the last of the planes to be hijacked. It left Newark Liberty Airport about 25 minutes late, and that delay allowed the passengers to find out what had happened at the World Trade Center and the Pentagon. The memorial borders the field where the plane came down. The Boeing 757 had been headed to Washington, aimed at the Capitol or perhaps the White House. But the last attack of 9/11 ended here when the passengers won the first victory in the war on terror. Mark Strassman has their story.
This is the moment after United Flight 93 exploded in the field. Of all the jets hijacked that day, we know the most about Flight 93 because the FBI found both its flight data recorder and its cockpit voice recorder intact, as deep as 25 feet underground. It was the only usable cockpit recording recovered from 9/11. The details of what happened are contained in the official report of the 9/11 Commission. About 30 minutes after Flight 93's late departure, United Airlines sent a text to the pilots warning them of the other hijackings. Apparently in disbelief, the pilots asked for confirmation. Moments later, the cockpit voice recorder picked up sounds of a struggle. "Mayday, mayday, mayday," one of the pilots radioed air traffic controllers. Someone yelled, "Get out of here." A woman, likely one of the flight attendants, is heard to say, "I don't want to die." The hijackers stabbed the crew with box cutters. Flight 93 turned for Washington, D.C. The terrorist pilot, Ziad Jarrah, tried to speak to the passengers on the intercom, but instead he hit the wrong switch and broadcast this message over the radio.
Hi, this is the captain. I would like to remain seated. We're home aboard and are going to back to the airport and we have our demand to please remain quiet.
But some of them, including Tom Burnett, already knew what was really happening.
He told me what was going on.
Dina Burnett talked to her husband 3 times. She told him about the World Trade Center and the Pentagon, and he told her this.
He said, "Don't worry, we're going to do something." And he hung up.
The voice recorder picked up the sound of the passengers outside the cockpit door. One yelled, "In the cockpit, if we don't, we'll die." Then there's the sound of a flight attendant's service cart being rammed into the door again and again. The flight data recorder shows Jarrah, the pilot, rocked the 757 wildly side to side in an apparent effort to knock the passengers off their feet.
What they did in 30 minutes is amazing.
Ken Nackey's brother Lou was among the passengers.
They were able to gain information, formulate a plan, voted on a plan, and acted that plan, put it in motion, and prevented a greater tragedy all in 30 minutes. How amazing is that?
As the passengers charged the cockpit, one of the hijackers is heard to ask in Arabic, "Is that it? I mean, shall we put it down?" The other replies, "Yes, put it in it and pull it down." Flight 93 rolled onto its back and crashed into the countryside at 580 miles an hour. It was 20 minutes from Washington, D.C. Mark Strassman, CBS News, Atlanta.
And just as a footnote, Lou Mackey, who you just saw there, was from Wheaton, Illinois. So his brother is very active right now in the Flight 93 Memorial. Here are your 40 passengers and crew, the heroes of Flight 93. And we'll talk about them as we go along in this presentation. Remember the numbers 40 and the numbers 93. Those will be important. This is the passenger seating plan. And you see the kind of orange in the first class, those were where the hijackers were. If there was something positive about this, it was that this was a very low attended flight. And 40 people died, but it could have been almost 200 had the plane been full. Some of the scenes, the official government scenes from the crash site. This is how far the plane went into the ground when it exploded. This is from one of the first responders in Shanksville who came on the scene. You can still see the smoke rising from where the plane crashed. The government sent over 200 investigators, both federal and state, to the site. They spent days and days here. And they wanted to recover anything and everything, not only from the passengers, but the plane, the hijackers, the crew. And they recovered quite a bit. This is the largest piece that was left of Flight 93, the fuselage, part of the fuselage system. And the cockpit voice recorder. Because of this, they were able, in the commission report, which we'll talk about in a little bit, to actually know what had happened. Of the other 3 planes that were hijacked, nothing was recovered at all. This was the only plane that they had evidence of, things that went on during Flight 93. Soon after Flight 93 crashed, temporary memorials started to come up. Here you see a chain link fence that was erected, lots of different memorabilia, family members, relatives, friends, and just people in the area came to the site. If you notice on the upper right-hand corner of the fence, you'll see a first responder's jacket from Shanksville. So lots of people wanted to leave things here and have some kind of remembrance of what was going on. And we're going to learn about the memorial and how it was developed.
Almost immediately, temporary memorials develop in the fields near the crash site. People come to this place, this field of honor, to remember. In 2002, Congress and the President designated the Flight 93 crash site as a national memorial, a place protected by the National Park Service, set aside for the American people to commemorate those who so courageously gave their lives, thereby thwarting a planned attack on our nation's capital. An international design competition was launched, with a design for a permanent memorial chosen through a public process. The Flight 93 National Memorial design is specific to this landscape. It is open to natural change through the seasons and over time. The architect intended the memorial to be quiet in reverence, yet powerful in form, a place both solemn and uplifting. A tower holding 40 wind chimes will mark the entrance to the memorial. The sound of the chimes in the wind is to be a gentle reminder of the voices of the 40 passengers and crew. A winding entrance drive of 3 miles leads to the planned Visitor Center and Learning Center, which will be the interpretive and educational hub of the memorial. A black granite walkway will mark the flight path and lead visitors to their first view of the crash site below. Tall walls will frame the sky where Flight 93 passed overhead. These will be places to learn about Flight 93 and the larger context of the September 11th attacks. 40 groves of maple and oak trees radiate from the ring road which descends from the visitor center to the plaza. Each grove of 40 trees is a living memorial. A walkway lined with trees, an allée, will provide visitors the opportunity for a contemplative walk from the visitor center to the crash site. Plantings and sandstone benches mark the entrance to the memorial plaza. Trees shade a courtyard with exhibit panels. A shelter made of textured concrete and reflective glass opens to a black walkway. The final resting place of the passengers and crew is outlined by a black sloping wall. A granite walkway and 40 polished marble panels inscribed with the names of the passengers and crew aligns with the flight path. A native sandstone boulder marks where the journey of Flight 93 ended so violently.
So that's an overview. That's an overview of the memorial and how it's laid out. We're going to go into a little more detail now, and you can kind of get a sense of, if you want to visit it, which I hope some of you might, what you'll see and how it's done. It opened to the public basically 10 years from the crash site, the date on 9/10/2011. And the winning architect, his name was Paul Murdoch from Architects from Los Angeles. The name of the actual site, the plans that he submitted were a crescent of embrace. And as you saw there, 40 groves of trees formed a crescent around the crash site. Each grove had 40 trees in it. Again, the number 40 comes up. And you'll hear that again. Here is the Flight 93 as you come in. This is the first thing you will see from the National Park Service and the U.S. Department of Interior. The actual memorial landscape is about 1,000 acres. And the first thing, if you're coming from the Pittsburgh area, since most of us can identify that, you enter off of Highway US 30. It's about 80 miles southeast of Pittsburgh, so about an hour and a half drive. And then the first thing you come to is that Tower of Voices that you kind of saw, and we'll get into more detail about that in a little bit. From the Tower of Voices, you drive that 3 miles to the Visitor Center, and you can either walk or drive over to the Memorial Plaza. The interesting part about this is the Tower of Voices was the last project to be completed. The Visitor Center was the second to last project to be completed. And the Memorial Plaza, which Scott Pelley, you saw him, talked about, was the first actual project of this memorial to be completed. And then the fourth biggest part of this is the crash site. So you have 3 places you can actually go and visit, and then the crash site itself. So here's the Tower of Voices and how it looks now. It's got an open land design to let the wind come in. If you do go, I hope you go on a day when there's a breeze or it's a little windy. A team of engineers, acoustical experts, and one composer helped design the chime system. This is what it looks like from when you're inside and you're looking up. You can see all the chimes. It's open on, it's kind of a crescent shape like the groves. And also now they have benches down below. You can walk around it, you can walk through it, and you can just sit and be quiet and peaceful and listen to the chimes. I'm going to read this because I think it's important. There is no other chime structure like this in the world. The shape and orientation of the tower are designed to optimize airflow through the walls, the tower walls, to reach the interior chime chamber. The chime system is designed using music theory to identify a mathematically developed range of frequencies needed to produce a distinct musical note associated with each chime. They want the chimes to talk to each other, and they do. The intent is to create a set of 40 tones or voices that will be in harmony with each other while giving the visitors, you all and us, a sense of peacefulness. And I think that's so important because when you go there, this is a reverent place, a place of peacefulness. So I want you to kind of close your eyes a little bit and just listen to the chimes play. So hopefully you got a little of the sense of peacefulness that's all about what this Tower of Voices is all about. The next structure you come to is the Memorial Visitor Center. And in the Visitor Center, you're going to find lots of things, including educational things about not only the Flight 93 Memorial, but also about 9/11 itself. This short little video will talk a little bit about it. Get back to the beginning. Oops. Sorry about that.
The center uses photos, videos, and artifacts from the tragedy to tell the story of the flight.
It's now open to the public, and Ross Gadani took a look inside and found some powerful reminders of heroes of Flight 93.
It's amazing what 40 people did in a 30-minute window of time.
And that is what the Flight 93 Visitor Center is supposed to be about. It opened for the public today for the first time. The first to enter, the families of the 40 passengers and crew who died in this Pennsylvania field on September 11th, 2001.
It works on every level. It's healing, it's contemplative, it's powerful, it's meaningful.
Lori Guadagno's brother Richard was lost on Flight 93.
We need this memorial because it will tell stories for generations to come, and those stories are so important.
From the black wall that symbolizes the charred trees behind the crash site to the personal effects of the passengers and crew, this visitor center tells the story of the flight that fought back.
Joey was a great guy. I mean, family meant the world to him. So I'm not surprised that he acted. I'm not surprised all of them acted. You know what I mean? But, you know, Flight 93 was the end of their lives. It wasn't their defining moment in their lives because they were fathers, they were mothers, they were brothers and sisters. You know, I think if you look at the history of everyone, and I can only speak for my brother, is that they were amazing people before Flight 93.
One of the people I talked to who lost someone on Flight 93 hopes that in years to come, the people who are on board that plane are not seen as victims, but in fact just common people who did something uncommon and in the end saved thousands of other lives. In Shanksville, Ross Gadani, KDK Team.
Sorry about the closed captioning there, but hopefully you got a sense of what the visitor center is about. Basically, when they designed it, the architects, again, the same architect who designed the whole memorial, they designed these cabinets as you walk in, and based on both sides are different parts of the story of Flight 93, both memorabilia and other interactive. Some are interactive. You can actually pick up a phone and listen to the phone calls that some of the passengers got when they were on board the flight, learning about what was happening. And this is basically beware the cockpit intrusion, as we learned earlier. The memorabilia, and look in the upper right-hand corner, there's that jacket from the first responder in Shanksville that was on the original memorial that had gone up many years ago. And other memorabilia. Some of it people brought. It wasn't just all that was found at the site. People wanted to leave and let people know what was going on. And here we see the flight path. This is part of that memorial, the visitor center. And as you walk down the flight path, and you can actually walk down, flanked by the walls that flanked this actual area the plane flew over, we come to a balcony that looks out over the crash site. A common field one day, a field of honor forever. That's real important. A field of honor forever. And you can look out onto the crash site. The third and final project, or actually it was the first project that was opened, was a Memorial Plaza. And it was opened in 2011. And when you come in, you come to a series of benches here. You can see the docent is one of the U.S. Rangers, Park Service Rangers, and they give different talks at different times. I highly suggest if you go, you take the time to sit and listen. It is very informative, and they are very knowledgeable about not only the memorial, but about the Flight 93 incident. You walk down the walkway and there's benches all along. So if you can't walk very far, you can sit down and relax. On the far left side, you see that black sloping wall. It outlines the crash site. So you walk alongside the crash site itself. And at the end, you come to the 40 marble panels. Each marble panel has the name of one of the heroes of Flight 93. And then you look out through a fence, this big wooden fence out to the crash site, and you see the sandstone rock that marks the crash site's final position. Yesterday on one of the news channels, they had actual members of the family walking out of the gate to the sandstone rock to the crash site. I thought that was very moving and pretty nice. They were able to go. Normally, visitors aren't allowed to do that, but this was a special day and a special time. They also started the program in 2012 to plant the trees, the 40 groves. Each grove had 40 trees representing the 40 heroes. So each person had their own grove of 40 trees. They also had a group of volunteers plant over 15,000 seedlings across 23 acres. They are trying to restore the land to make it more a forest again, a habitat again for people, for animals, return the land to normal. This is a timeline of how they're planting over 150,000 tree seedlings, and they completed it in 2022. Actually, that's when we had gone there in 2022, and they have just completed their planting. To plant a tree for decades, the National Park Service, Friends of the Flight 93 Memorial, and the National Park Foundation have partnered to complete the reforestation project that will result in 150,000 native trees planted at the Flight 93 Memorial. This conservation project is part of the memorial's original design and reclaims the former surface mine with native trees to reestablish a wildlife habitat, create essential windbreaks, and complete the healing of the memorial landscape. Some of the Friends of Flight 93, this is an organization, not-for-profit organization, originally started by obviously family members of the heroes of Flight 93. It is still viable today. If you want to Google Friends of Flight 93, you can read all about it. And actually, if you're interested, join or make a donation. And I think this is kind of a nice expression. And I hope the bar goes away, because timeless in simplicity and beauty, like its landscape, both stark and serene, the memorial should be quiet in reverence, yet powerful in form. A place both solemn and uplifting. It should instill pride and humility. The memorial should offer intimate experiences, yet be heroic in scale. Its strong framework should be open to natural change and allow freedom of personal interpretation. We want to restore life here, to heal the land and nourish our souls. In this place, a scrapyard will become a gateway, and a strip mine will grow into a flowering meadow. But more than restoring health, the memorial should be radiant in loving memory of the passengers and crew who gave their lives on Flight 93. We were attacked on 9/11. This was our first victory in that terrorist attack. We stopped a terrorist hijacked plane from going into our Capitol building. These 40 passengers and crew of Flight 93. Going to play this video. It's kind of a recap. It's very peaceful. Just enjoy it. A common field one day, a field of honor forever. Thank you.
Thank you, Alan. It was very poignant. We will take questions from our audience first.
Thank you. That was very inspiring. I remember, I think, when they first played some of the recordings from the people on the plane, was it Todd Bennett who said, "Let's go"?
Mm-hmm.
Was that the words?
It was, I don't remember who exactly said it. Beamer, Todd Beamer. Yeah, it might have been, but that was what his wife had communicated with the recordings, was that he said, "We're going to do something."
Okay.
And
who owned that land before it crashed?
it was a series of, there was a mine, a couple different mines there. And there was also, it wasn't a junkyard, but a field of, trying to remember, but there were farmers out there too. There was some farmland out there. But there were a couple different strip mines and one other kind of small business there. Yes.
Stand up and tell.
I had the opportunity to go to Willow Creek Church in South Barrington several years back, after obviously 9/11. And I heard Lisa Beamer, was Todd Beamer's wife, speak of the whole incident, and they had recovered the voicemail of his having called her from the plane. And it is overwhelmingly emotional. He stood up and said, "Let's roll." And he got these passengers to join him and took down these terrorists. So frightening. And because of this man and others who followed, they saved how many at the Pentagon? I don't know how many, but many. This was a true hero, and all those who helped him were heroes too.
The whole plane responded the way I understand it. The pilot and the co-pilot had been stabbed by box cutters that they had gotten aboard, and the rest of the plane pretty much responded, and that's why this is a tale of heroes.
Ellen, I know that our trip took to Shanksville was so peaceful, and we were thinking at the time, Kay's relatives that came there for all the right reasons, and it was just such a massive difference of what occurred against what was the spirit of America. Here are a bunch of pioneers farming. I think they would be honored to know what is up there. I'm going to ask you a tough question, and I think it's tough for you because I know as a Vietnam veteran, that is so close to your heart. But the Vietnam Memorial was one of the more poignant experiences of my life. And I think there are many people here who have seen that and experienced it. It's more than seeing it. Is there any way to compare what you, and I know it's an unfair question for a Vietnam vet, but I'm just asking, since you are familiar with both, is there any way to compare the two?
Well, it is a hard question. When my family and I went to Washington to the Vietnam Memorial, I could not walk along the walls. I sat at a bench outside the wall, and they walked because there were names that I was a medic in Vietnam, in the Vietnam era, not in Vietnam. And many of the people who we treated were on that wall. And there's another personal story, which I'm not going to get into, but of somebody on that wall. And I couldn't walk it. On the Flight 93, it's a whole different experience because it isn't just remembering people who died in the war. This is really an honor to those 40 people. And it's a very small number when you think about what happened in New York and even in Washington at the Pentagon. This is a very small number of people, but they won the battle. They took that plane, they helped take that plane into the ground before it got to our capital. And that's what you have to remember. Had the terrorists completed their mission, the U.S. Capitol would have been looking like either the World Trade Center or the Pentagon building and all the people inside.
So I'm going to have a more practical type of question.
Okay.
If we were to go there, and many of us have not, but now I think we will, what should we look for as far as if we were to drive, how long might it take us to get there? And do you pay to get in? And how long do you spend being there? What would you consider a trip to be?
Well, as I said, different people, you can fly to Pittsburgh from here. You can drive to Pittsburgh. Pretty much Pittsburgh is the major hub there, and it's 80 miles southeast of Pittsburgh. So if you get a car or if you drive, however you want to go. So if you think of Pittsburgh as your hub destination. At the memorial, it is pretty much at least 3/4 of a day, maybe longer, depending on how you feel inside when you're there. Like at the Tower of Voices, you can spend 5 minutes there, or you can sit there and listen to the chimes and the people talk for an hour and walk around and look at the architect. One of the things I didn't mention on the Tower of Voices, guess how tall it is? 93 feet. Remember I said the numbers 93 and 40 were so important. It is 93 feet high exactly. 40 chimes, 93 feet. So, and then when you get to the visitor center, they have other educational programs inside that you can sign up for. We walked around, we looked at the different panels, and there's a room where you can, a glass enclosed room where you can look out over the crash site if you want to. You saw it in the video, a woman was standing there looking out. It depends on how long you want to structure and your trip there. But I would say a good day, or at least, and that's not rushing it. And some of it's beautiful. I mean, if you like walking, there's wonderful walking paths. You saw the bridges over the lakes, and you can walk all around. And that's what it's made for you to be peaceful inside and reverent. Anybody else? Well, thank you very
Allan,
much.
thank you so much.